Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be your friend, and it's a privilege to be here with y'all tonight. I am going to be speaking from a mental health perspective and talking about two questions that we get asked a lot during this crisis time. And one is it normal to feel anxious? And I think Jenny spoke to this tonight already. And the answer is yes, it is. It is normal to be anxious when we're in a crisis, when there is uncertainty, when there is danger. And actually, our anxiety is a friend. We don't need to think of it as an enemy, because the nervous system revs us up to be more alert, to pay more attention, to be more thoughtful and more careful, like to not have anxiety. You might have been in Florida last week and seen our college students. They had no anxiety, so they were not being careful like they needed to be. I think what we do have to know is, when does our anxiety get so ramped up that then it does us harm? And I think we have to know our own anxiety, what it feels like in us, because everybody experiences it differently. So to be aware, when you're having panic attacks, that's not a good thing. When you aren't sleeping at night, that's not a good thing. When you are having these obsessive thoughts that you can't get out of your head, your mind won't stop racing. And with anxiety, it tends to go to the worst scenario. You know, the most deadly, dangerous thing is what you think about. So pay attention. Don't be afraid of some anxiety, but be aware when it's ramped up too high. And we're going to talk a little bit later about some skills, some things that'll help you deal with that. Don't be afraid to call your health care provider, or to call your counselor, or to find a counselor. If you really think like your anxiety is really messing with you and you're not able to do life the way you want to do it. The other thing that we often are asked, I think like in this COVID-19 crisis, is it normal to feel blue, to feel lonely, to feel isolated, to feel sad? And I heard someone say on one of the programs on TV this past week that all of our nation is really grieving. And I think, well, that's an interesting thought, because grief and depression feel somewhat the same. And I think what has happened is we've had great change, and it's been rapid. And in this rapid process of change, we have all suffered loss. Our children have lost their friends at school. Their school has closed. And we've heard so many stories about how people have lost. People have had, I think even Amy's wedding was moved up. So, these are depressing times if we let them be. And it's okay to have a sad day. It's okay to have a wave of loneliness. This crisis is calling for isolation, and God has not created us for isolation. So it's a hard thing to deal with. Yes, it is normal to have some of the sad, lonely, blue waves. But if it lasts days and days, if you're finding that you can't get out of bed in the morning, if you are really having those depressing thoughts that life maybe isn't worth living, or a sense of worthlessness, or what help am I to anyone, these kinds of depressing thoughts, then yes, and we often know with this comes maybe over drinking or self-medicating, medicating too much. So these are the things to be aware of. And if you need a little more help, don't be ashamed or embarrassed to call your doctor, call your health care provider, call your counselor, find a counselor, because counselors are still working. They're still available right now. I thought about a few things that could be helpful during this time, and wanted to share those very briefly with you. The first one is be kind to yourself. You know, when you are depressed or you are anxious, you tend to think, what's wrong with me? Everybody else is coping better than I am. Or you're thinking, I should be a better Christian than this. If I were a better Christian, I wouldn't be so anxious. But I just want to remind you of what God said to Paul. Remember in that 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, and Paul was saying, please take this these thorns away from me, the thorns in the flesh. And God just said, you know what? In your weakness, I am made strong. In your weakness, I am there for you. And then you know what Paul said? Then I delight in my weakness. And I think of Romans 8, that 8th chapter, where it says that really, and I'll read it. It said, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. That very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. God has empathy for us when we are weak, when we are depressed, when we are anxious. Be kind to yourself. The second thing is anxiety and depression tend to cause us to look inward. So try to be outward focused. Care about other people. How can you help someone else? How can you just show empathy or kindness to someone? Even if you have to stay in your home, think of ways you can reach out to other people. Another thing to remember is exercise, eat right, keep a schedule. Try to have some form of schedule in your life. It helps us deal with the uncertainty of the day, to have some control somewhere. Be sure you're getting your sleep and stay connected. Go online if you need to learn deep breathing. You can go to the internet. I'll just say slow deep breathing is one of the most wonderful techniques for calming anxiety. So breathe in slowly to the count of 4 or 5, just gently, and hold it a count or 2, and then breathe out slowly, 4 to the count of 4, 5, 6, 7. That slow, gentle exhale really helps calm down a nervous system that's ramped up. Limit the amount of news you're watching. God has created us to be very sensitive to the other person and to mimic, to even mirror each other. So you are going to take on the negativity and the fear, and it's going to become yours. Limit the amount of news you're watching. The other thing is we need to see faces. So with your family members, if you're not together, do FaceTime. Do one of the platforms like Skype or GoToMeeting or Zoom. Find a way to see the faces of the people you love, because that's how we're wired, to respond to faces, body language, voice. We are wired that way. And then worship. How do you worship? What takes you to the Lord? Is it like the beautiful music tonight that we participated in? Does that take you to the Lord? Reading scriptures, listening to podcasts, seeing different worship services, reading great books, being out in nature, watching the birds, and looking at the flowers that are blooming now. This kind of thing that takes us to the Lord. Whatever takes you to the Lord, do that. Nothing is better. There is nothing like the soothing that God can do for our souls. And then practice gratitude, because the heart that is grateful is a heart that's open to the Lord. So as you walk, as you sit outside, get in that sunshine and smell the fresh air and remember what you're grateful for, and say it out loud or write it in a journal. But spend time being grateful, and that really does open your heart. It makes room for God in your heart. And then laugh, joke, play, because this is a hard time, but we are going to get through it, and we know we are, and God is faithful. He's going to see us through. So you may not have had much time to be playful lately. We've been working. We all work so hard. Now's the time to do some of the things you haven't been able to do. Spend this time to draw your family together and to laugh and joke and be playful with each other. Finally, pay attention, and Jenny mentioned one of her favorite passages. Spend time sitting with your favorite passages in the scriptures that calm your heart and fill you with joy and hope. One that I thought about tonight, I like the Psalm 34:7 that says, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him And I love that. And then he says, and he will rescue you. And I think sometimes I need to be rescued from myself when my thoughts are going in the wrong direction, when my anxiety is up, when I'm feeling alone and isolated. So just have your favorite verses. And I'll just end with this one, because this is one that I often share with my family members, and it's precious to me. And that's that Numbers 6, the great blessing of Numbers 6:24 through 26. It says, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And that is my prayer for you, for me, that God will give us his peace, that he will be present, and that he will protect us. So blessings to you.